Hi, I'm Bruce with the Space Force Association, and you've tuned into the Spacepower Radio Show. And today, I have that's right, two retired Space Force generals that I'll be speaking with. You won't want to miss it. Stay tuned. My guest is retired Brigadier General Damon Feltman, and his most recent assignment was the mobilization assistant to the Deputy Chief of Space Operations, Strategy, Plans, Programs, Requirements, and Analysis, U.S. Space Force at the Pentagon. General, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Yeah, so that was my last military assignment, and then after I retired, I stayed on for another year and a half as a civilian at Space Development Agency. So I left Space Development Agency about a year ago, and that kind of wrapped up all of my kind of my federal affiliation. So yeah, retired military with Air Force and Air Force Reserve, finishing up at Space Force headquarters, and then some remaining Space Force civil servant time on top of that.
Wow, that's quite something. We've had a chance to talk to a couple of generals on the show, but I'm always curious. I mean, that's a big commitment to kind of go all the way through to general. Is that something that you started with, like when you're younger man, you wanted to be in the Air Force and really do things, or how did you get going, and why the Air Force?
Yeah. So general, no, that was never, I think, in my aspirations. I was probably like a lot of folks, and actually General Saltzman, the Chief of Space Operations, I heard him talk to some young ROTC cadets, and his approach is kind of the same as mine, where I came in really right out of college. I was on an ROTC scholarship, and decided I would do my obligation, and then kind of, at the end of each kind of window, I would figure out each assignment, figure out what I was going to do. And I was having tons of fun doing what I was doing. A little bit later on in my active duty career, decided that I wanted to stay on as a reservist for some family commitment reasons, and joined the reserve. And really, at that point, again, I was still like, hey, I'm just going to do what I need to do to contribute to the mission. And then kind of as the years progressed, people started looking at me for like leadership positions, and then eventually command positions, et cetera. And really, kind of the next thing I know, I'm on this track that creates the opportunity to be considered for a general officer, and that's kind of how I ended up where I ended up. I had to do certain things to keep myself competitive, but at the end of it all, it was never like a set goal. When I first started out, it's just something that kind of that happened along the way because of the jobs that I had, the success that that my teams and I were able to create, that type of thing. And then how I landed in the Air Force had this idea of being an astronaut. Like, again, a lot of folks in the Space Force probably start out with. And I joke that charm and good looks got me through high school. But when I got to engineering school, that didn't go so far. So I was a mediocre engineer. In fact, I did not finish with an engineering degree. I finished with a business degree in quantitative analysis. So I was technically oriented, and actually that was considered by the Air Force a technical degree because of the computer programming and the math underpinnings. But I came into the space business because that's just been a lifelong passion of mine, and I was very fortunate to be able to compete and get into the Air Force's space missions, and that carried me on to the end with Space Force.
Yeah, that's exciting. Yeah, I can totally relate to engineering. I did actually finish engineering school, but not by much. I mean, I crawled over the finish line. That was a rough go. But you learn to you learn to do things that seem impossible just a few months earlier. That was what I took away from engineering school. But so that's exciting. So yeah, astronaut. I think I can relate. I could see you being an astronaut, General. I could see that. Maybe there's still a chance for us to go.
Now you can buy your way. At least you can buy your way above the Kármán line. I still have tremendous respect for guys like Two Fish Fisher, Jack Fisher is a friend of mine. We worked together for a little period of time. I had the opportunity through SFA to interview Brigadier General Nick Hague a couple of weeks ago, and I tell you the quality of people those gentlemen are, and there are also female astronauts. The quality of just their like mental skill, their ability to be like high powered engineers and scientists is just amazing. And then who they are as people, just super humble, super approachable. They're just fantastic folks. And so my little quip there about buying my way into space, and not to at all say that I would be anywhere on par with people like that, but yeah, it's a different world these days. I mean, 30 years ago, 35 years ago, there was one way into space, and that was through NASA. Now we're on the edge of this, commercialized astronaut capability. Certainly, you can take these quick 15-minute jaunts above the Kármán line, kind of the way that we did many years ago with when aviation was first coming online. You could go to your little airfield, and barnstormers would for a few bucks you could go to take you around the pattern a few times, and such. So yeah, it's a different world than when I came in.
Yeah, barnstorming in
80s
space.
and 90s.
I like the idea of that. That would be
Yeah,
fun. Yeah,
yeah.
I agree with you too on the just the quality of individuals. I as a young engineer, I worked at the Kennedy Space Center, and it just turned out that the building I worked in was the same building that had the astronaut quarters in it. And so occasionally I would ride the elevator. Astronauts would get in, and of course I'm just a fly on the wall. And you're right, the quality of those individuals, just the just the brain power kind of oozes out, and you're just like, oh yeah, okay, I'm glad these people are doing this. And then you're totally right about the character. Very humble people to a person, and just it's the kind of people you just want to be around. I'm curious. You talked with. I did see that you had a chance to talk with General Hague, but I didn't catch the interview. So give us a couple highlights.
Yeah. So the way that came about, Space Force Public Affairs reached out to Space Force Association, and they actually reached out to the Huntsville chapter where I am to say, hey, General Hague is going to be in Huntsville for an event at Marshall Space Flight Center. So we have a NASA center here in Huntsville. Is there a way that we can set up some time for you guys to meet him and do a community event? So we did two things while General Hague was here. We did a space power interview. SFA has this ongoing space power series that will get post-produced and put online. So we did one of those. But the main event was a community style activity. So we partnered with, for the facility, we partnered with the University of Alabama at Huntsville, UAH. We partnered with them for the facility, their on-campus theater. And then we had a corporate sponsor. KUHS Government Solutions was a corporate sponsor. And we had General Hague for about an hour, where he basically just kind of recapped some of his experiences. He had like a 10, 15-minute video highlight reel from his most recent mission to space. And then we did Q&A. So that's kind of the setting. Some of the interesting things that he talked about. We asked him kind of specifically about like the role of mentors in his life, how he got through setbacks in his career. It took him 3 tries to get accepted into the astronaut corps. What his life was like as a military member. His wife was also military. So as dual spouse, he had this very unique job, but he's still in the Air Force / Space Force. And so there are military commitments that are going on. Same thing for his spouse. So how they balance those types of things, and then kind of some insights for young people who are looking to become guardians, whether they're officer or enlisted. What are some of the things that he could offer these young Americans as they get ready to start their professional military careers?
Yeah, that's I am going to have to catch that interview. That's exciting stuff.
Yeah.
I
Actually, I think today, so today's August 15th, we had our video producer do like little 2-minute clips. There's supposed to be a little snippet that gets posted on social media today. So we've got the 2 long form videos and then a handful of snippets that are getting posted periodically. So I think another one's coming out today.
Okay. On the SFA, where is it posted on social media?
I think LinkedIn. We have LinkedIn, Instagram, X feeds with SFA. So look for those to get posted out there.
Okay, perfect. We'll do that. Yeah, gosh, there's one other question I want to ask you too. What was it? You got me thinking about all this space stuff. Oh gosh, it's related to military careers. I'll think of it
Yeah.
again. I will ask you though. So the official direct military service you wrapped up in 2023, and then it sounds like 2024. You finished kind of the civilian side of that. So that was, I'm sure that feels like yesterday and or 100 years ago, probably all at the same time. But
Yeah. It's amazing how quickly the time passes. So yeah, just a couple of weeks ago was 2 years since my official retirement date on the military side, and then a year ago is when I stepped out from the Space Development Agency. And this week I had a chance to go to the retirement of Lieutenant General Deanna Burke, longtime friend. We were, I first met her when she was out at Vandenberg at the J Spot. I was working some programmatic things for that. Then we were squadron commanders together, wing commanders together, and our paths kept crossing. And just a good dear friend. I made the observation to a couple folks there. Events like that are also they're one part, ceremony for the person, but it's also another part is a reunion. You get to see a lot of your old friends, and she is towards the end of our generation. There are only a handful of folks from my time frame of coming in the service that are left, and to see her uh, finish up her career in grand fashion as the chief operating officer for the Space Force was just a fantastic treat. Yeah.
yeah, that's exciting stuff. I did remember my question.
Okay.
So you're in Alabama.
Correct.
So so why Alabama?
So a couple of reasons. Number one, my wife didn't want to move back to Huntsville.
That's all you
I'm
need
sorry,
right
move back
there,
to,
right?
I said Huntsville. Sorry, my wife did not want to move back to DC. When I was
DC.
invited
Yeah.
to come up to Space Development Agency, I was asked whether I would consider going back to DC. And while I very much enjoy going to our nation's capital, there are challenges with living there. Traffic and it's just a busy place. Um, Kind of my wife and my bias is we kind of like the slower pace of. We both grew up in the Southeast. Uh, uh, in Huntsville, just fit, right size city. It's got space baked into its DNA. And at the same time, when I was coming on to Space Development Agency, they were initiating their mission presence here in Huntsville. So Space Development Agency is part of the Space Force, and there's an operations center for the SDA's uh, proliferated warfighter space architecture is going in here in Huntsville. So that's what brought me here. And then the last piece is my father's family is from Northwest Alabama, about an hour and a half west of here, and so it's a little bit part of getting close to home as well.
Yeah. I hear that frequently. I can totally relate to that. Huntsville is on my list, by the way. I've never been there, but I talk to people frequently who say it's an absolutely wonderful place.
It's a great town. So space is baked into the DNA of this place. Just about 6 weeks ago, uh, Marshall Space Flight Center had their 65th anniversary celebration,
Wow.
and so Marshall does this community-wide event every summer. But this year's theme was Marshall 65, so it was their birthday celebration, and SFA got to participate in that. But yeah, people often kind of overlook that, like, we got to the moon because of what was going on here at Marshall. This was Werner von Braun's home for a long time, and so the Saturn V program was here, the Lunar Lander program was here, the Space Shuttle program design was here, the space station has a large operations center here. There's still engine test stands running out here. So huge space community. And it's just baked into the DNA of the city, everything space.
Yeah. That's a wonderful place. I want to shift gears just a little bit.
Sure.
We're super excited about this too, by the way, at SFA. You are the brand new Chief Operations Officer for SFA. And that's super exciting. That is, in my opinion, just just kind of the thing that we need to kind of bring stuff together in an organized fashion and really march forward together. But I got to ask you how it happened. Knowing our CEO, Bill,
Yeah.
sometimes it's like sitting around the table and the last man sitting at the table gets it and he ran. But tell me how it actually happened.
Yeah. So I've known Bill for 20 years. And when Space Force Association was established, Bill put it together. Actually, it came into existence just a little bit before the Space Force itself was created. And he texted me one evening and said, "Hey, check out this website." And I go to it and it's sfa.org. He was like, "Wow, this is kind of cool. Who's doing it?" He says, "Well, I'm doing it." And I asked, "Well, okay, is this just an idea or is this like real?" He says, "No, no, it's real. I've got the 501(c)(3) status getting put together. I've got the charter getting put together. This is going to be a real thing." And he invited me back then to uh, help organize. But because I was still serving, I was like, I think kind of from a um, optic standpoint, me being a senior space person, uh, leaning in, helping establish the SFA probably wouldn't go over very well from the uh, general counsel review. So I became a member and have been a member ever since the very beginning. And when I came to Huntsville, Bill asked me to help with build a chapter here in Huntsville. I did that for the past 15 months. We have a lot of success here. And then a couple of months ago, he's like, "Hey, we're SFA has been around for several years, but it's really at the point now it's starting to scale, becoming a much more larger, uh, more effective organization. And we just need to grow the overhead, the leadership and management structure, put some processes in place." So he reached out to me to see if I could assist, and so I was like, "Absolutely, I'm glad to help where I can." He took it to the board of directors, and they agreed. So yeah, Lon as the COO, doing it in a fractional capacity, which means I'm not doing this like all day, every day, but adding support where I can. In fact, just before I got on with you, I met with the financial persons just to check in with her to see how things are going. Earlier this week, I was in DC traveling. I met with our chief growth officer to see how things are going with her, and really just helping the team run more effectively at the national level is kind of what I'm doing.
Yeah, I tell you, just again from a personal note, having someone with your experience and background step into that role for us is only great things can happen. That's my opinion.
Thank you.
So, but tell me a little bit. So you've known SFA for a while,
Mhm.
and now you're kind of in the inner workings of SFA. What do you what are your thoughts and plans and hopes and dreams for kind of your
Yeah,
perspective from COO?
I think that so there are a couple of priorities going from kind of near term to mid term. In the near term, it's all about Space Power Conference 2025. So that's the flagship event that we put together every year down in Orlando. It's in December. And the first time that SFA did it, I went down there just as an attendee, and I was blown away with how amazingly well put together it was.
Yeah, I
Um,
agree.
and 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 I joked with Bill. I was like, "Okay, so were you lucky or were you good?" Because to have this idea for a national conference, excuse me, to go as well as it did, um, it was really, really impressive. So last year was the second year, and it was a little bit bigger, a lot better. Some of the lessons learned were applied, and it was better. And so, all right, great. Now my undergraduate is in quantitative analysis, so now we have a sample size of two. You can plot a line with 2 points. It's like, well, this looks like it's on a positive trajectory, but really we need to get to statistical significance. You got to have several of these things and see how it goes. So yeah, we are on a good glide path for Space Power 2025 in terms of planning and lining up sponsors and lining up attendees. We're ahead of pace compared to the past couple of years, but there's still miles to go before we sleep. We've got a lot left ahead of us. Still lining up sponsors for events, finalizing the agenda. We do have a couple of confirmed speakers, like General Saltzman has confirmed he's going to be there. Lieutenant General Brandt has confirmed he's going to be there. So getting some folks confirmed as speakers and sponsorships put together, that's kind of what our focus is right now. But that's number one. Number two is Space Power is number one near term. Kind of on this midterm is attention on growth and development of the chapters. SFA has grown in the number of chapters, and as a volunteer organization, and with some of these chapters going into places that don't have a large Guardian presence, it's helping those places understand what Space Force is, number two, what Space Force Association is, and then number three, how do you build a chapter that supports both functions and creates value in the community so that people want to support the Space Force. Had a lot of success here in Huntsville in a short period of time. And so how can I help the Vice President of Chapter Operations communicate to the other chapters on some of the things that were successful here in Huntsville that could be repeatable elsewhere? So that's kind of number two. Number three is create value for our sponsors because they're really the lifeblood of the organization. They help provide the operating capital for the organization. So what are the things they're looking for long-term with their relationship for Space Force Association, and how do we create those things? Those are probably my three biggest challenges or areas of focus while I'm sitting in the seat here.
Yeah, that's outstanding stuff. Yeah, and I remember just happenstance. I'm here in Orlando, and I happened to go to the very first one, and that was my same impression that you mentioned. I was like, wow, this is really well done. And I was also impressed that General Saltzman seemed to bring his entire team to the which in industry I've been to a different life behind me where you go to a lot of conferences and in high tech, and you'll see the leaders there, but you don't see, they kind of come and go pretty quick. They'll drop in for a keynote, then they're gone, and the team may or may not show up. But General Saltzman was there right in the front with his whole team. I was very impressed by that.
Yeah. So in no way is what I'm about to say meant to detract from any other venue, because I've gone to lots of events all across the country and around the world. What makes Space Power unique is it is solely focused on the Space Force. And other venues, the Space Force might be one of several market segments being represented, if you want to borrow a business phrase. Broadly speaking, there's civil space, military space, commercial space, and international space. From a U.S. point of view, those are the four major markets. And there aren't any places that focus, or there weren't any venues that focus just exclusively on the military side of things, on the Space Force side of things specifically. And SFA through Space Power has a event that is specifically about the Space Force and U.S. Space Power, the military contribution to U.S. Space Power. And you're right, the Chief of Space Operations, General Saltzman, he's there for the duration. Large chunks of his team are there for the duration. And, fortunately, the Space Force is small enough that the event is not overwhelming in terms of the number of folks. It's 1,500 people will be there. A large chunk of them are going to be Guardians, and so it's a much more familial style event. It's small enough that you will probably see everybody the entire week that you're there, and the leadership of the Space Force is accessible. Easy to just kind of run into a senior leader at the coffee stand and just strike up small conversation. And things of that sort. And plus the industry participants who are there, it's not like they're competing with another vendor who is from another market from the other side of the world or something like that. They're all there for the Guardians.
Yeah. Well said. That was just an outstanding venue. And I heard a number of the Guardians say the same thing that you said. This is something that's for us. It's exciting stuff. Hey, I want to wrap with a little bit about your home chapter there, the one that you built in Alabama. So you've been the president of the Space Force Association chapter in Alabama for a year and a half or so. Stood it up. You're getting ready to hand it over to someone. But tell me about what's going on in Alabama for SFA.
Yeah, so SFA had a couple of efforts at trying to get a chapter established here, and that, you know, that it didn't go as desired, and that happens sometimes. The SFA, small organization, Space Force just getting started, the smallest service, and so it took a couple of bites at the apple, so to speak. And when I got here, I offered to give it another go, and I was able to find a couple of folks who were from Huntsville or had been in Huntsville for a while. They were very enthusiastic about supporting the Space Force, and I was able to build a small cadre of energetic volunteers. And together, it just took off. I mean, we still have a long ways to go, I think, where I wish it, where I hope it goes. But by comparison, when I got here, we had about the SFA's roster of members had about 20 folks who identified Huntsville as their home area, and they were full paid up members, and that was about it. And in the course of 15 months, we now have about 200 members participating. We're having monthly chapter meetings. We have a small local sponsorship program that we built ourselves, but now it's getting kind of rolled up into the broader national sponsorship methodology. And that's been hugely helpful. We have a local company that is helping us organize the next every month's chapter meetings. And then we were able to really leverage some personal relationships and kind of disciplined approaches to pull off some, I think, some pretty amazing activities. So the flagship achievement for the year was Space Force's Always Above video that they put out regarding, what it means, why the Space Force exists and what it means to be a Guardian. Space Force put that together with Public Affairs, Space Force / Air Force Public Affairs, and the U.S. Space and Rocket Center, which is here in Huntsville, reached out to us directly and like, hey, we hear there's this thing going, and we really would like to premiere it here in Huntsville, and can you guys help us? And I said, we'd love to give it a shot. And during our first planning meeting, I said, hey, I'll reach out to General Saltzman's planning team and see if we can get the boss to come down here. And we went through the whole process of describing the event and the value, et cetera, of participation. And General Saltzman came down for an evening, and we premiered Always Above here in Huntsville. To my knowledge, it was the first public viewing of the event. And General Saltzman spent an hour with the community, but about 150 folks in attendance. Great event. But we're also able to do things like I mentioned before. General Nick Hague has come in. We did events with Marshall Space Flight Center. Did an event with the University of Alabama at Huntsville. Have teamed or done some events. I shouldn't say team, but we've supported. That's the more accurate word. We supported activities with the local Space Force Junior ROTC program. There's only 10 of them in the country, and one of them happens to be here in Huntsville. So we helped out with those, help those kids. And University of Alabama at Huntsville has a brand new Air Force ROTC program. And so we helped the ROTC program a little bit. So we've been able to kind of plug in and with dedicated volunteers, a little bit of effort, and a little bit of commitment, have been able to have a very successful chapter program out here.
That's exciting. So tell us one or two things coming up.
Well, so this week is our August chapter meeting. We really just got through our big push. Our July and August was our busiest 2 months of the year. I think we had 4 events back to back, about 2 weeks apart between each of them, and it just kind of worked out that way. Our lesson learned is not to do that again. And hopefully next year we won't have 4 events in 7 weeks. So we have a chapter event coming up. We kind of hit a quiet period for the remainder of the year as we really kind of turn our attention to trying to get folks to go to Spacepower Conference. We'll probably have a very casual but deliberate birthday celebration for the Space Force at the end of the year in December. And then we turn our attention to next calendar year. Things that are being discussed, helping the University of Alabama at Huntsville with their Business of Space Conference. They do that every February. So the business school over there at UAH, helping them out a little bit. I forgot to mention we did that back this spring. We brought in now Brigadier General Michelle Idle from Space Systems Command. We brought her out and featured her on a panel. So some more events like that are on the agenda. Plus some fun things. We've got a fantastic minor league baseball team here. So try to do an event at the baseball game and fun things like that.
Yeah, that sounds good. Good stuff. We have been talking with retired Brigadier General Damon Feltman. General, thank you so much for taking time today.
Yeah, great fun. Thanks for hosting me. For the Guardians who happen to see this, thanks so much for what you're doing. Space Force Association is here to help you find personal and professional success during your time in the Space Force, and for when you at some point step out from the Space Force. It's a place where you can be with your peers and your friends, and further your passion for space. So hopefully you'll find a home here in the Space Force Association.
Excellent. Well said. We'll be right back at the Spacepower Radio Show right after this.
The Space Force Association is a way you can get involved in the space community, network with military, industry, and academic leaders, and support our Space Force and the Guardians who protect us. The SFA provides opportunities to research, inform, and advocate for a strong Space Force. SFA will keep you informed on the latest developments in space and our Space Force. Show your support. Sign up today at ussfa.org. That's ussfa.org.
And we're back with Lieutenant General Bill Liquori. General, so we were just talking about kind of your career trajectory. You've just commanded a squadron. So what? And you're a
Lieutenant Colonel at that point.
Lieutenant Colonel at this point. So then, is it time for the Pentagon? Is that kind of how things moved, or what happened after that?
Yeah, so great question. I did go back to Washington, D.C., but it wasn't to the Pentagon right away. It was time for more schooling, as we talked about earlier. So it was time to go to what we call our senior developmental education in the Department of Defense. There's lots of schools. Every service has its own. I ended up being really fortunate. I was selected to go to a sister service school. I actually went to the Marine Corps War College at Quantico in Northern Virginia area there, just outside of DC. Most people, after they go to senior service school, it's time to go to a joint job. And a lot of those joint jobs happen to be in the Pentagon. So I assumed going into that assignment that I was going to do a year at Quantico in school, and then a couple years at least, if not longer, driving into the Pentagon and next assignment in the Pentagon. As I got to the end of the school year, I actually got a note passed to me that said I had a phone call, and turned out a 2-star in Stuttgart, Germany at U.S. European Command Headquarters. Was needed to add a division chief to do missile defense on the J5 side of EUCOM. So J5 is typically our plans side of the house in our organizations. And so he was going to bring me out that way. He wanted some of the background that I had. And so first overseas assignment, I should back up. I did a deployment
I'm sorry to interrupt. Can I ask one
Yeah.
thing? So I'm always curious about this, because you always hear like General so-and-so says, hey, I want this guy over here. And it seems like, like it doesn't matter what time of the year it is or what the budget cycle is or what that person's actually doing. It's just kind of like, boom, people get shuffled around. Is that how it actually works?
So there is an element of that. I mean, at the end of the day, we all are serving in the armed forces. Those of us in the armed forces know that we are serving, something that's larger than us. And so there's a phrase that gets tossed around. It can be trite, but it's real, and that's the needs of the service or the needs of the Department of Defense. And so none of us signed up, raised our hand, and thought we were going to have stability at the same location for 20 years. We all kind of, whether because ROTC taught you that that's how the path was going to go, or in my case, you've been living it your whole life. I mean, I've been moving every 2, 3, 4 years since I was a kid, so it really wasn't that new. I will say it can be hard on the kids Ours were in high school and middle school at the time. That's a tough time to uproot your kids. But you know what? It ended up being a great assignment. Nobody wanted to come home at the end of the 2 years when we were told we had to come home. Yeah, so that is a little bit of how it works. Now, I will say that we have tried to evolve our personnel structure and processes and assignments, and begin to engage the military member and say, hey, what are your inputs, that kind of thing, and then find a good fit for both sides, if we can do that. And in many cases we can, and so why not do that if you can do it? But in my case, it was a great opportunity. President Obama had just taken office, and he had decided he wanted to change the way we did missile defense in Europe. So I had a chance to go be a part of standing up something new, which is always fascinating to me. I think that's kind of interesting. I meet a new team. I'm on a joint team now. So my team that's working missile defense with me is Army Air Defenders, Navy, Aegis missile defense experts, Marines, you name it, and civilians as well. So it was a chance to kind of broaden my horizon. So I did that for 2 years. And then it was time to go back to the Pentagon. I worked in the Office of Secretary of Defense, specifically in the Space Policy Office. I did 2 years of policy work there, which was another really cool opportunity, something I had not done before. It's a good thing to do at that point in your career. You kind of start to see the inner workings of the Pentagon and what it takes to run the Department of Defense and those types of things. And then from there, I was fortunate to be selected to command again. I was selected to be the commander of the 50th Space Wing, which is actually the wing I started my career as a second lieutenant back in that communications or satellite communications squadron. So a chance to go back to the place where you started was pretty
That's
neat.
pretty cool.
At that point, the base had been renamed Schriever after kind of, the father of our modern military space business, Bernard Schriever. And so went back as the commander of the 50th Space Wing. At that time, we were still Air Force. And so as the commander, I had multiple operations group, one space operations group, one network, so cyber operations group, a mission support group who did all of the care and feeding things that nothing happens without the support group. And so that, as well as be another role as the base commander, so making sure the base itself is running, not just the satellites and the computers, but the base itself is running, and that's a lot of that mission support group side. So I learned that side of the business, which was fascinating. The chance to kind of get to know our civil engineers, our security forces, who every base you go to the point of your story about your daughter being saluted, it's a lot more for them than saluting the officers that are coming through the gate. They're protecting the base, they're protecting the personnel on the base and the missions on the base. One of my most favorite things to do and favorite memories was once a month we'd go out and kind of work the gate in the morning with the defenders, and you get to meet them, see them in their environment. It's just a real treat. Contracting squadron. I mean, all of these things that without them, we don't have any space operations. We don't have any intel operations. We don't have cyber operations unless we have all of these kind of other things. And so it was a real treat. Great 2 years to be a part of the team out of Schriever in the 50th Space Wing. And then they tell you, all right, the fun is up. It's time to go do your next job kind of thing. And so there, I went back to the Pentagon. There's a trend here. I'm pretty sure that our cars can drive from Colorado to Northern Virginia on their own. Yeah, I went to the Pentagon. I had a great opportunity. Again, you'll hear me say great opportunity every step of the way. I was the senior military assistant to our Undersecretary of the Air Force at the time, a woman named Lisa Disbrow, who was just a amazing leader, incredibly well respected, super smart, very engaging. And I had a chance to kind of make sure that her front office ran smoothly and make sure that she was ready for the meetings she needed to go to on behalf of the Air Force. And so what you find is, as you continue in your career, you continue to make a difference, or hopefully you do, but you do it at a different level. And so I had a chance to work for her for probably just short of 8 months, believe it or not. It should have been longer, but a different opportunity opened up. the National Security Council staff has a position on it called the Director for Space Policy. And basically that person leads the interagency. So the Department of Defense, the Department of State, all the cabinet agencies, NASA, anybody that has anything to do with space, that person leads the development of policy with all of those other organizations. Well, Ms. Disbrow had previously worked on the National Security Council staff. She knew the opportunity that it would present. And so she let me go interview for that position. I got selected, and I ended up being there for 2.5 years, which was, again, that is nothing I ever imagined I would be doing. But I had a chance to serve 2 presidential administrations. I worked the
What
last
kinds of
year.
things, I got to ask you,
Yeah, go ahead.
General, what kinds of things I can imagine, but what kinds of things are like interagency policy? I mean,
Yeah.
and how does that, I mean, even just one government agency agreeing with itself seems almost impossible. So how do you forge agreement or policy amongst agencies, and what kind of policies do you do?
Yeah, sure. So let's take the types of policies first. We'll just pick that. So as I got there, my predecessor had just led that interagency team through almost 2 years worth of policy development to set in place what the Obama administration wanted to do from a space security perspective. One of the things that happens is when you're at the White House on the National Security Council staff, there is someone from the intelligence community, usually the Central Intelligence Agency, well, first of all, the president receives a daily brief from the intelligence community. But those of us on the staff in the National Security Council also, from another level of briefer, get a daily briefing. We can ask for reports. If there's certain things that we're seeing, we can ask for more details. And my predecessor basically saw a growing trend of adversary countries increasing their counter space capabilities, their weapon systems that would counter the advantage the United States gets from its space assets. And so he saw this with his interagency peers, raised this issue through the policymaking process. And ultimately, right before he left, there was a National Security Council meeting where President Obama approved his approach to how the country was going to tackle space security. And so I arrive, and basically my first year there is kind of the initial stages of implementation of that approach. And so that is also working with all of these interagency partners on that approach. I can't do all the details of it, but that approach had numerous lines of effort. Those lines of effort had various tasks, and then there were measures of effectiveness, kind of thing, like any good strategy. So it was, all right, let's begin to implement and kind of watch how this goes. And so I worked on that a good bit of implementation of that approach. But another policy issue that had come up at the time was, so this is late 2016. We have a number of commercial imagery companies that are, kind of beginning to put satellites on orbit where, from a commercial perspective, taking pictures from space. That is not something that historically was a commercial thing. That was often in the government, often classified. But technology and some amazing companies started to have this capability. Well, they have to go through a licensing process, and that licensing process was long, laborious, and sometimes stifling from the perspective of a company that wants to get up and get running and start to provide a service to the country. And so one of the issues we worked on was streamlining that policymaking process. That was another one of those things that I did. Okay, then the U.S. government does its thing, and there's an election, and okay, so now a new administration comes in. The first time President Trump came into office, at the time, the Air Force said, "Hey, you're right in the thick of things and some important policy work. From an Air Force perspective, we'd like to keep you there to help transition space issues for the new administration." Well, the Air Force gets an input, but obviously the new team gets to decide, are these people going to stay or not? I was fortunate enough to be selected to stay, and so I did 1.5 years in that administration. So now what we have is you've got an approach that, as I described it, we've basically been implementing for 1 year. And, anytime a new administration comes in, there's a lot of people need to be put in place, nominated, confirmed, all those kinds of things. Then processes get put in place. And so as a staffer on the National Security Council staff, there's some slow moments in that time frame, and there's some busier moments. But one of the things you kind of do is, all right, let me what's my elevator pitch when the new team gets here and says, what should we do on space? President Trump picked General McMaster to come in and be his national security advisor. General McMaster got there a very strategic focus, and he had an all hands with everybody on the National Security Council staff. And we walked in, and everybody got handed a 3x5 note card. And you kind of look at it and you sit down in your seat, and General McMaster comes in and talks, and he says, as a staff, our job is to make sure that we tee up strategic issues for the president. And if we allow ourselves to, we're just going to be at our computer answering emails and taskers, and we'll be in the tactical, but we're not going to really shape the strategic. And so he said, you each have a card. You don't get to leave until you write down a national security issue that you think we ought to tee up for the president to help us, the way he described it, change the balance of power in the next 4 years, which is kind of what an administration comes in to do. So I had a chance to write down that elevator pitch on that 3x5 card, and General McMaster said, "Hey," the gist of it was, "Hey, we're in the middle of a space security approach. We're a year in. Now's a good time to step back, assess it. Is it going well? If so, double down. Is it going the wrong direction? If so, let's change direction and resource a different way." Ultimately, the way that works in our policymaking process is it gets teed up through a series of committees in the National Security Council. So after General McMaster sees it, it goes to what we call a deputies committee meeting, which is all of the cabinet secretary deputies, so the Deputy Secretary of Defense and all of their peers. Then a principals committee meeting. At the same time, in the space business, the president has said we're going to reestablish the National Space Council as another office at the White House, and it's going to report to Vice President Pence, and they're going to handle all space issues. Fortunately for me, in the middle of the lower level of this process, the vice president and the national security advisor sort of were of the same mind, and they said, "Hey, the more people work in this, the better. So let's just make sure we're all rowing in the boat in the same direction." And so that enabled me to work with the Space Council staff, who was added into this interagency mix, and we kind of charted a national space strategy that the president signed in 2018. And it's a bunch of writing, drafting, editing, sending around for coordination. To your point, it would be hard enough to do this within one department. Excuse me, but we're talking about, tons of departments and agencies that each have an equity somewhere in the space side of the house. So my job was to kind of lead this team and guide us to an end product that we thought was worth the president's signature. And so couldn't have done that myself. Certainly never could have done that myself. And so I had a great group of peers, I would call them, throughout the interagency: State Department, Commerce, Treasury, NASA, the intelligence community, multiple elements of the intelligence community, the other services, the Office of Secretary of Defense. And so we ultimately crafted this national space policy that the president signed in March of 2018. Which was probably the biggest lift that I did while I was there.
That's amazing stuff. And is it like I know the National Security Council by its name, but is this, I've never understood, is it like 10 guys? Is it thousands of people? Is it hundreds of people?
That very much varies based on the president. A couple things. So the National Security Advisor is not a Senate confirmed position. They are an advisor to the president.
Okay.
So number one, what that person does and the purview that they have and the authority that they have comes direct from the president. And if the president wants to empower the National Security Advisor to do certain things, then they will do that. Number two, between the president and the National Security Advisor, they decide how big of a staff do I need to be able to work policy issues the way that we, this administration, want to do. I would say generally it's been in the order of 100 to 300, somewhere in there, ebbs and flows. I think currently it's actually probably less than that. This team has decided they want to do things a little bit differently. That's the purview of the team that or the president that got elected. During my time, we were in the 100 to 200 range, and it's divided up into different directorates. And so there are directorates who are functionally oriented, and there are directorates that are regionally oriented. So regional is really easy to conceive of, right? So there's an Asia focused directorate. There's a European focused directorate, right? You can pick the regions of the world. On the functional side, you might have counterterrorism. You might have cyber. The directorate I worked in was the defense directorate. So we tended to be kind of the interface on defense related issues. Obviously, as those stray into regional focused things, then we work with our regional peers on the National Security Council staff. But that's generally how that is set up and works. But it ebbs and flows based on the president and the National Security Advisor at the time.
That's interesting. So this 2018. So are you into, have you made it up into general ranks at this point? You're colonel?
Yeah, so I was fortunate while I was working for the Undersecretary of the Air Force, I was selected to be Brigadier General. I ended up pinning on after I had arrived at the National Security Council office. Ironically enough, while we were on the National Security Council staff, all of us, even if we are detailed from the military, we're in suits. So really, I looked like all the others, which is by design.
Yeah.
Right, we're all peers, regardless of what our rank or position was in our home agency. But it was a little ironic. I had the ceremony, and that was wonderful. And but I really very rarely wore my 1-star rank just because of the job I had at the time. During my NSC time, I was selected for a 2nd star, and I really pinned that on when I went back into the military side of things. And so I didn't wear 1-star very often.
That's a little bit of a bummer. I mean, you work hard for that kind of stuff. It's not like
it was all right.
It's all right.
It all worked out. I have no complaints.
No complaints. Hey, so let me ask you. So you're Brigadier General. You've done in 2018. You've kind of culminated in this big space policy, and then you have to have a front seat at the formation of the Space Force. Am I right about that?
Yeah, front seat, literally.
And you were part of the original leadership team there, yeah?
Yeah. So let's fast forward that a little bit for your listeners. So, President signed the National Space Strategy in March of 2018. It was probably 2 weeks after that he first started talking about a Space Force at various speaking engagements. A lot of people weren't sure what to make of it at the time, but if you back up and think about it, I just told you that we spent a year drafting this national space strategy, and the president felt it was important enough to do, as did all of the cabinet secretaries. So we signed this thing into being, and if space security is that important to the nation, then why wouldn't we have a military service organized, trained, and equipped to protect and defend that domain? Why leave it to another service who's focused on the air domain to do both? And so really that's kind of how this got started. And to your point on a front seat, there was a National Space Council meeting in June of 2018 that took place in the East Wing of the White House. And not a spot that I often was able to visit, but I was a part of kind of the staff to get ready for the meeting. So I had a seat. Wasn't quite front row, but it felt like it. And that's where the president directed then General Dunford, our chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, to begin the work to establish a Space Force. And so I still had about 2 more months left in my time at the National Security Council staff. We started the initial work of what became Space Policy Directive 4, which directed the establishment of the Space Force. And so kind of the early steps, there was a lot of work to do. It's that same interagency team rolling up their sleeves and saying, okay, how do we get about doing this? Let's get that crafted.
Wait, I'm sorry to interrupt, General. So I got to ask, so you're in the East Room. So the president just rolls in, signs an executive order, and rolls out? Or how did that work?
He, as I recall, he didn't sign
Vice president's there as well?
time, but it was very clear that the order had been given. I'll say it that way.
Yeah.
And so off we go. And so what he did sign eventually was this Space Policy Directive 4 that I was talking about. So a lot of times the president will give guidance to go do something, and then we, the staff, work the paperwork to make it official. And then he did sign out Space Policy Directive 4, which then said the Department of Defense needs to go create a Space Force, and here's the things that it needs to do. It was time for me to leave at that point. I handed off to another Air Force one-star who came in, Michelle Edmondson at the time. She took my spot, carried that through, continued that through, and then a series of others after that. General Troy Endicott was her replacement, and at that point, we are into the birth of the Space Force, the signing of the National Defense Authorization Act, and so we are now a service. At that point, I was back in Colorado Springs at what was then the Air Force Space Command headquarters, became the early team that was what became the Space Operations Command. My boss at the time was General Raymond, who had become the commander of U.S. Space Command, the combatant command, was named the first chief of space operations, and was spending much more of his time in Washington, D.C. than he was in Colorado. And I got a phone call one day that said, "Bill, I need you to come help me stand up the Space Force with a host of others. By no means am I the only one." But he asked me to come be the Chief Strategy and Resourcing Officer, which, as you alluded to earlier, the team that I had was responsible for Space Force strategy, requirements, partnering with international and commercial, and then the budget. Some small, very easy tasks that we had to tackle as a brand new service. But
Wow.
had a
And
great
so
team to do it with.
the service started small. I've asked this question for a few folks, but I bet you know. So how many folks were kind of like in the original group that came in and started the Space Force?
Oh yeah. So, well, General Raymond tells a joke all the time. He was a Space Force of one for several months because he was the only one that was named. Now, those of us that were Air Force Space people sort of knew that was our path. I mean, if somebody didn't want to do that, then they were going to transition to a different career field. Me, I was hugely excited. Never in a million years did cadet or lieutenant or Captain Liquori ever think that we would have a separate service while I was on active duty. So the chance to be able to shape that, sign me up, I'll be there tomorrow, that kind of thing. So it was General Raymond first. Then he picked his Chief Master Sergeant of the Space Force, our first Chief Master Sergeant of Space Force, Roger Toberman. And so it's two of them. And then the very next hire, and I may have those two backwards, but was our personnel, Chief Human Capital Officer, Pat Mulcahy. Because obviously, if you need to become more than a Space Force of 1 and 2, you need a personnelist to help you hire a bunch of people. So Ms. Mulcahy was next. And then it was gradually build out the headquarters staff, while another group of people is building out what we call the field organizations or the field commands. We had 3 of those, an operations focused one in Colorado Springs, the acquisition arm Space Systems Command in Los Angeles, and then our training and readiness command that was at the time started in Colorado and is about to transition to Florida. But yeah, it's part of an amazing group of folks to get a chance to do something that we're doing for the first time in 72 years in our nation's history, since our previous service, the Air Force, was signed into law in the National Security Act of 1947. So we had studied all growing up all the importance of creating a separate Air Force, and now we had a chance to do it for real on the space side of the house.
That is so cool. So you're a 2-star then, and then you stay in the same role as a 3-star, or did you do additional?
So I was a 2-star in Colorado Springs, but part of coming to the Pentagon was I was being nominated to be our Chief Strategy and Resourcing Officer. That nomination came with a 3rd star, and so had to go through Senate confirmation process.
Really?
Like all 3-star positions are nominative, which means you're nominated to it. The Senate then reviews and confirms, and at the point that they confirm you, then you pin on that 3rd star, and so that's how it worked for me. So we moved back to DC for time number 5 for those that were following along, and the first thing we do is a promotion ceremony where General Raymond promoted me to Lieutenant General in the Space Force. That one was interesting because technically, by all the paperwork and things, I had to resign my commission from the Air Force. So I had to sign a piece of paper for that, and then sign a piece of paper that says I am now raising my hand and transferring into the Space Force as a 3-star general.
Wow, that's amazing stuff. General, we're going to have to take a break, but I want to come back and get to some other things with you. So we'll be back right after this. Well, thank you for tuning in to the Spacepower Radio Show today. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have. A special thank you to my guests, retired Generals Damon Feltman and Bill Liquori. And as a special note, we'll be wrapping up our series with General Liquori on the next show. Until then, I'm Bruce with SFA.